Hi there, welcome to this video where I'm on the banks of the River Severn at the Purton Ship Graveyard. So this is going to be quite a bit different than my normal videos. As you can see behind me, I'm surrounded by lots of abandoned barges that have been purposely grounded in this area, and it's known as the Ship Graveyard or the Purton Halks, depending on who you ask. This area is on the edge of the River Severn, and I'm about half a mile north of Sharpness. Now, it's a really interesting location. I'm going to try really hard not to slip on all of this mud because it's quite slippery, but I know whatever happens, I'm really going to enjoy my photography. So there's a really good reason why these barges were abandoned here. Back in 1909 there was a real concern that the River Severn would wash away a lot of the bank, making it really unstable, and this would cause a really big problem for the Sharpness and Gloucester Canal that runs only about 25 metres away behind where the camera is now. So they came up with a plan very quickly. It was a little bit ad hoc, and what they decided to do was run barges, schooners and trows up onto the bank and then poke holes in the side, so they sat onto the side of the river, and over time the bank has built back up again. So as a result, you can see lots of barges lying on top of the riverbank, and it's a photographer's paradise. These barges make particularly good coastal defences because they're made from concrete and iron, and they're known as ferro cement barges. So they've got a frame of iron and the skin is made of concrete. Now that does seem counterintuitive, but anybody that's got a little bit of physics knowledge will know that as long as the boat itself displaces more water than the boat itself weighs, the boat will float. So even though it's made of iron and concrete, they still float perfectly well. But once they've had a hole poked into the side of them, they sink onto the bank and they make for a really stable coastal defence. And they've been here so long now that I'm stood on the top of one, and it's covered with grass because of all the silt that's built up on top of it, and sometimes you can barely tell that you're standing on top of a boat until you see a little bit of ironwork poking out of the grass. The tide is right out at the moment, so it's very difficult to tell how much water must come over this area, but looking down into this hole that's in front of me, it's absolutely full of mud and silt from where the tide washes up and fills these barges, making them even more stable. And I don't know whether the microphone's picking it up, but it's like a reverberance chamber. It's so echoey, I can hear my voice coming back at me from out of the hole. In 1999, a local maritime historian called Paul Barnett conducted a privately funded enterprise to have the site's 86 vessels recorded, and it is now known as Britain's largest ship graveyard. Just beside me here is a kind of memorial to the barges that have been abandoned here. So it records some of the names of them, and then a little bit further back is a smaller plaque, and you find those by the side of every barge, and that gives the name of each barge, where it's located, where it was built, lots of other details such as the tonnage and the jobs that it did, and it's just really interesting looking at them all. Now, if this is your first time visiting the channel, you can do me a really big favour by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications, because it really helps the channel to grow, but it makes sure that you don't miss out on any future content. Just here there's a little bit of wood sticking out of the riverbank, so this must have been part of one of the wooden ships that was abandoned. It's got a little bit of metalwork that I'm standing on, but it makes for a really interesting photograph because the sun is just starting to break through the clouds a little bit. So we've got some interesting light on the side of this, but to enable me to actually get this photograph, I'll put the camera down low so that lifts this bit of wood up in the frame and brings a little bit of the other side of the river into the picture as well to make it a little bit more interesting. And just because I can't get down quite that low because of my knees, I've used the back of the screen to frame the image to make sure it was a good composition. Now, as I work my way along the riverbank, I keep coming across more and more things that are interesting to photograph. Now, this particular barge is pointing straight up the riverbank, and it must have been run at the side of the river at some speed to allow it to ground itself so high, but it does make for an interesting photograph, because what I've done is I've put the front of the boat very much in the front of the frame, and I've used a very wide angle so it makes it very large, and then I've got a diagonal sloping away towards the back of the boat. And to make sure I've got everything in focus, what I've done is I've done a focus stack as well, just to be absolutely sure that I've got the photograph. Now, this particular boat is really what you imagine a shipwreck to look like. You can see all of the old wooden boarding that is barely now still holding together, and it's got some really interesting textures. So what I've done is I've taken it from this side, pointing towards the light. Now, I did notice this tree trunk just here that was lying in the opposite direction, sticking out of the frame. So what I did is I lifted it up and I pointed it into the frame just to improve the composition. I think that's quite allowed. I've not really done any damage. I don't know what it's doing here anyway, but it's absolutely improved the image by doing that. And what I've also done to make sure that I can get a really good exposure is I've done an exposure stack. So I'll probably turn that into a HDR when I get back in the computer. What I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to go around the other side of this wreck, because the boarding on the other side has got some really good texture. So let's snip around the other side. This side of the wreck is just as interesting because the light is coming this way and hitting the side of the boards. Now, what I've done is I've taken several different compositions, but I've also focus stacked them as well to really make sure I really pick out all of the detail. And what I think I might try as well is I might try it in colour, but I might also try it in mono. So you let me know which one you prefer. What I've decided to do with this picture here is simplify it a little bit. To my left, there's another one of these supports that's still remaining, but when I tried to keep all of them in the frame, it stretched the photo out too much, and I don't think it was quite as impactful as just having 3 of these supports, because I think 3 works better anyway than 4, and it just gives the whole picture more impact. Well, I'm now facing the photographer's dilemma, and that is, do I pack in now? Because I think I've done all of the photography that I want to do at this point in time, but the light has started to improve. The sun is starting to poke through the clouds. Behind me, there's some bits of blue sky, and so now there's a potential that the sunset could be quite good, and that's going to happen in about an hour's time. Now, because I've finished all of my photography, I've got to hang around a little bit, but because I've thought of this now, if I go back to the B&B and look out the window and we get a brilliant sunset, I'm really going to kick myself. So for the sake of an hour, I think I'll hang around a little bit more, see if there's anything else that I can photograph, really nail down a good composition. I'll probably put the drone back up again, but I think I'm going to have to stay for that extra hour just in case the sunset now does perform. The sunset's been looking really promising for the last 45 minutes, but unfortunately we're now about 15 minutes away from when the sun actually sets, and it's gone down behind a bank of cloud on the horizon. So I'm not very optimistic about whether we'll get any colour in the sky. There's still a little bit of cloud in the sky there behind me that could catch some colour if it does manage to poke through some of the cloud over there on the horizon, but I'm not really very optimistic. But I did have to wait anyway, just in case something happened. You never know with these things. anything could happen in landscape photography, and if you're not in location, you're definitely not going to get the shot, so it's certainly worth waiting for. And while I've been waiting, I've taken a few atmospheric shots into the sun as an experiment, just to see if I can do some HDRing when I get back in the computer, and hopefully one of those might turn out really nice. But it's still not all over yet. I can still see the sun just poking out from behind the haze. We've got 10 to 15 minutes, so fingers crossed something will still happen. What I'll do now is I'll leave you with some of my favourite shots and drone footage from this afternoon. Well, that's how it goes sometimes in landscape photography. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And now I don't really regret waiting for the sunset, even though we didn't get any colour in the sky, because in the meantime I've taken some interesting pictures, and you have to take that gamble sometimes because the sun could have done all kinds of spectacular things. It was so promising for so long, but just at the last minute we didn't get any colour. Well, if you have enjoyed this video, do let me know down below in the comments, or nip over to my Vero account, that's at Cloaked Photography. Leave me your comments there, and you can also see lots of my pictures. Now, if you like what I do on the channel and want to help support me to make future content like this, you can nip over to my Teespring store. There I've got a range of merchandise on offer, like the sweatshirt that I'm wearing now, so go and check that out, because the purchase really does help the channel and it's very, very much appreciated. And also don't forget the super thanks button as well. But you don't have to spend any money at all to support the channel. You can do that simply by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications. It really helps me out and it makes sure that you don't miss out on any future content. Watch out for next week's video, that goes live on Sunday. In the meantime, go and check out this video just up here. But all that's left now is to say, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.